Alright guys, so things have really gotten off the rails. This is an emergency video. The trade war between the US and China, they have reached a new dangerous level. An unstoppable force has officially met an immovable object. And last week, Trump hit Beijing with a reciprocal tariff of 34%, and China countered with their own 34% hit. But the Staff the Apprentice isn't backing down, and we are really moving towards an endgame scenario. And as we said many times before, we have to prepare for the worst because at this point, neither side can U turn without looking weak. Trump is going all out with this one. He scolded China for illegal subsidies to local companies and massive long term currency manipulation. And if Beijing doesn't remove their tariffs by today, Trump will impose an additional 50% tariff on April the 9th. And this is simply crazy. That would mean more tariffs on top of the 20% imposed in March and 34% last week. China will be facing a 104% tariff trying to import into the United States. I really think Trump believes there's a price at the end of the rainbow. This confrontation will lead to the total decoupling of China and the US economy. Very few goods can survive a 104% tariff. US consumers will definitely be forced to buy domestic or not buy at all. Worst of all, Trump is not taking any meetings with Chinese officials, which means no negotiations. This is dangerous because there's no dialogue to be had. Now, I understand Trump wants to reshore everything back to America, but their supply chains can't withstand a full tariff war with Beijing. The US consumer will simply collapse. 70% of US economy is private consumption, and if you hit Chinese goods with a 100% import tax, it will be American consumers that hurt the most. The US imports mainly consumer goods from China, and in many categories, it's at least a quarter to a third of total imports. Just the smartphones alone, we are talking about $50 billion worth from Chinese suppliers. So that $1,000 iPhone will suddenly cost $2,000 now. Will the US consumer pay an additional $1,000 tariff to the US government? Or will Apple absorb the pain and destroy their own profits? Because Chinese suppliers won't eat the tax. And if you told me that the US had an ample supply of cheap raw materials, cheap energy, and labor costs, they might pull the win. But the US has none, and many of their essential inputs are subject to Trump's tariffs as well. And here's the thing, the US understands their supply chains are fractured, and that's why Trump actually excluded key metals from his reciprocal tariffs. Steel and aluminum are excluded. Other EV metals like gallium are also exempted, but the majority of global supply of rare earths and industrial metals comes from China, and Beijing has imposed either restrictions or outright bans on them. With the recent threat from Trump, we can expect China to just ban every critical input to the US. There's simply no room for bargaining left. We are really headed down a dark road where the US won't be able to manufacture anything affordably. And the order of operations of fighting this trade war is simply out of whack. If you really want to stand a chance of winning, Trump has to balance the federal budget first and then secure US supply chain next. But because he wants to do everything all at once, he has reduced this to one big gamble, and we have no idea how the dice roll will end up. However, we now have confirmation that it isn't exporters that pay the tariffs. The burden falls onto US importers and US companies. Stellantis, which owns Jeep, is willing to help their US suppliers pay the tariff costs. They will help their suppliers absorb the tariff when they import their car parts from foreign sellers, including from China. It probably won't be 100%, but it still highlights the fact that tariffs hurt US entities. They are starting to absorb the import tax and take a hit to their bottom line. The trade war is starting to roil US companies. If more of them start to absorb Trump's tariffs, we could see corporate earnings just collapse. We could see more corporations do a Stellantis and help their local suppliers out. But remember this one point, whether mainstream absorbs the tariffs or companies take the beating, it isn't good news at all for US stocks. And if you are in the markets, this could be really, really bad news. There could still be more downsides to go in this market sell off. UBS just made a fatal forecast that earnings growth in the US might hit zero or even go negative. And this is from estimates of 14% growth in early 2025, a few months back. Since the levies were announced, the S&P crashed by 10%, and the crash is well over 20% from the peak. US companies are now facing what I call a double squeeze. Foreign revenues will go down, domestic revenues will also slow down thanks to US consumers going broke. Even Larry Fink from BlackRock is speculating another 20% drop in the markets is definitely possible. And even without the new threat on China, Trump's economy is already on the brink of collapse. But containing the Chinese economy has always been the end goal. Through multiple interviews we had with both Trump and JD Vance, they mentioned how the trade war is not just about the economy but about national security. And it's important to enter the psychology of how the Trump White House is approaching the tariffs, which is a very dangerous way to run things.
There's an old Soviet nuclear strategy called escalate to de-escalate. And fortunately, it was never, or so far hasn't been used. But I think with tariffs, you can escalate you can put tariffs on with the idea of getting rid of all the tariffs.
By escalating with China, Trump is basically putting the US consumer on a showdown with Chinese suppliers and who will break first. As a US consumer, you are now facing a very high tariff rate in your daily life. And to you, this is as good as inflation. You pay more for the exact same goods. Now, before Trump, your effective tariff rate was 2.5%. Now it has risen to 18.8%. You have to pay more, and if all your bills climb by that amount, you will definitely start to do cutbacks. In the first trade war, Trump's Chinese tariffs increased prices for consumers, and the total cost amounted to over $52 billion a year, and that's around a $400 increase in annual costs. Doesn't sound much, does it? But that was a tariff rate of 10 to 25%, and it wasn't across the board. The effects were limited to certain goods. The situation is very different today. It's a flat tariff punishment on everything, and the total rate is 104%. And a big shout out to our sponsor today, Indigo Precious Metals. When it comes to buying gold and silver, I trust Indigo Precious Metals in Singapore. They have made investing in precious metals safe, fast, easy, and simple for both small and large scale buying. I've been stacking gold for over a decade now, and I've learned two things when buying. You want to buy authentic gold bullion, and you want to buy it at the lowest premium possible to stretch your dollars even further. And I'm glad to say I found both of this at Indigo Precious Metals. Indigo Precious Metals is a leading retailer in Singapore. They specialize in physical gold, silver, and platinum. They are my one-stop shop when it comes to buying bullion. Their prices are sharp, and they have the best brands on sale, and I can test the gold on the spot. So if you're looking to make your first gold purchase, Indigo Precious Metals is the best place to start. Whether it's 1 ounce or 1 kilo, this is the reputable dealer you are looking for. So take action today. Click on the link below and enjoy a discount on your first purchase with the code SEANFOO. Start your gold stacking journey today. In response to the trade war, President Xi also vowed to fully unleash China's consumption in the face of Trump's tariffs, which makes sense. Trump doesn't want to have any dialogue, and it looks like we are on a collision course with no off-ramp available. Now, China's household consumption has never been more than 50% of the country's GDP, and you contrast that to the US, which is nearly 70%. China's net exports also don't contribute much to their GDP, and because of the size of their economy, exports only contribute to 2.1% of their economic growth. You can't rely on exports anymore, especially in a trade war when all the barriers are going up. They have to boost their own domestic consumption. There's no room left for hesitation any longer. They have to prepare for all the worst case scenarios. Now, what if Trump goes ahead and imposes a 50% additional tariff? The US might also impose secondary tariffs on countries that trade with China, and that isn't impossible. Remember the reciprocal tariffs on the world, the one where Trump held that ridiculous chart that just didn't make sense? Well, we now have word that the intention of hitting the world, including Penguin Island, was to contain China. Yes, I know it sounds like a stretch, but the US Commerce Secretary just admitted to it.
When we saw the president stand in the Rose Garden holding up that chart that you helped make, that wasn't actually tariffs. That was actually confusing to investors because it was some kind of other formula, and the countries themselves seemed kind of random. Like, why are the Heard and McDonald Islands, which don't export to the United States and are quite literally inhabited by penguins, why do they face a 10% tariffs? Did you use AI to generate this?
No, the idea is
Why
that there
are they
no
on the
countries
list?
left off. Because the idea, what happens is, if you leave anything off the list, the countries that try to basically arbitrage America go through those countries to us. Any country, like we had tariffs, the president put tariffs on China, right, in 2018. And then what China started doing is they started going through other countries to America.
Right.
They just built through other countries through America. And so the president knows that. He's tired of it, and he's going to fix that. So basically he said, look, I can't let any part of the world be a place where China or other countries can ship through them. So he ended those loopholes, these ridiculous loopholes.
So if you're an economist or you're studying economics, just throw away your textbooks. Nothing makes sense anymore. Everything in the US revolves around national security today. The US is afraid of China using Penguin Island to divert shipments to escape the tariffs. But that island is really part of Australia. Furthermore, China doesn't have to do that. Trump's tariffs are going to benefit their economy further. This chart shows us what could happen by 2030, how global trade flows could evolve. Should Trump impose his reciprocal tariffs, trade to the US would slow down dramatically. Focus on the top left quadrant. This is where the US imports less from the world, but China will export more to the world. Countries will be selling less to the United States, but buying more from Chinese suppliers. And how is that possible? And if you think about it, it's actually quite simple. Trading partners like Canada and the EU might put up steep trade barriers against US goods. So American products becomes more expensive to buy. And for exporters looking to sell into the US, they have to find a way to lower their cost of production. When the US consumer is collapsing, they become very price sensitive. Companies will get their inputs like batteries and electronics from China to defray their costs. And this isn't bad for the Chinese economy, it's actually great news for Beijing. Trade barriers outside the US might actually come down and the world has more free trade with each other. This is actually the worst case scenario for Trump. The US economy will get more isolated, costs will go up domestically, and innovation will also get stifled. Now, what Trump just did, he threw down the gauntlet, but China is also not backing down. So we are approaching an endgame scenario where both superpowers simply don't trade with each other. And the implications are huge. If this continues, it will spiral down and affect other parts of the global economy. The US and China could ban each other from investing in either one's companies. That's just one example. Beijing would most definitely dump all their dollar assets as well. Trump might even impose dollar sanctions, we have no idea. But we do know that the US is done with globalization and there will be no U-turn.
We protect and defend South Korea. And in exchange, they steal our automobile industry, they steal our electronics industry. We protect and defend Japan, and in exchange, they close their market to our cars. We protect and defend Canada, and they run up a massive trade deficit with us. We protect and defend all of Europe at a cost of trillions of dollars over time, and what do? They run an over $300 billion trade deficit with the United States. Why should America protect the world, send foreign aid to the world, defend the world, provide for the world, and in exchange, get ripped off by every other country in the world? And what do we have to show for it? The deindustrialization of the heartland, the destruction of the American dream, the eradication of our industrial and manufacturing base that we need for our national security, and the crushing of the American dream.
So hang tight guys, everything today is filtered through national security and the reshoring of industries. Now will Trump drop some trade barriers? Maybe, but the US and China, they are still on the dangerous collision course. Trump can't afford to back down, Beijing also can't afford to cave as well. But as always, let me know what you think. If someone flinches, who will it be? And who loses more in this trade war? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.